My girlfriend said, "You need me more than I need you." So I canceled all her credit cards and kicked her out of my house, where she lived for free. Before we go on, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which city you're tuning in from. I don't know exactly when everything started to change, but I'm sure it wasn't sudden. It was gradual, almost imperceptible at first, enough for me to doubt whether something was really happening or if it was just a bad patch. My name is Nico. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a private accountant. I'm not a millionaire, but I have a stable income. I've been building my client portfolio for years, and that allowed me some time ago to rent a comfortable place and maintain a relatively quiet lifestyle. When Valentina and I started living together, the situation was clear from the beginning. I would cover all the household expenses: rent, utilities, food, gas, maintenance, everything. It wasn't an imposition or a sacrifice that I felt weighed me down. It was a conscious decision. I already had that stability before she arrived, and it didn't make sense to me to split expenses when the income difference between us was so large. Valentina worked, yes, but at that time her salary was low. It wasn't enough for her contribution to really change the economic dynamic of the household. It was she who proposed compensating in another way. She took charge of most of the household chores, not because I demanded it, but because, in her own words, she wanted to feel useful and not completely depend on me. Even so, I also helped. It didn't seem fair to delegate everything to her. I cooked some days, cleaned when I had time, did the shopping. It was a functional agreement, and for a long time, it was also balanced. Besides, there was something more important. I gave her access to 2 credit cards in my name. She had no credit history, so no bank would give her her own card. She asked me for help to start building it, and I agreed. I explained the limits, how payments worked, billing cycles, interest. I wanted her to learn how to manage it well. At the beginning, she was responsible. She used the card for basic things: groceries, the occasional moderate personal purchase, occasional gas. She always let me know. There was always transparency. She even seemed grateful. That's why, when things started to change, it wasn't immediately obvious. The first real change came when she got a job as a waitress in a larger restaurant. It was a busier place, more customers, better tips. I remember she was excited when they hired her. She told me she was finally going to be able to earn well, that she was going to feel more independent. I was happy for her. Really, the first few weeks were normal. She came home tired, but with a good attitude. She told me stories from work, difficult customers, nice ones, new colleagues. But little by little, her way of speaking began to change. It wasn't immediate, it was subtle. She started mentioning the word independence a lot. Then came phrases like not depending on anyone, having her own, not getting used to someone else solving everything. They weren't ideas I disagreed with. The problem was the tone. She no longer said it as a personal goal. She said it as an indirect criticism. Then her new friends appeared, 3 coworkers from the restaurant. I didn't meet them immediately, but they became a constant part of her conversations. According to Valentina, they were confident women who didn't let themselves be controlled, who did what they wanted. Again, I didn't see a problem with that until I started noticing how those ideas began to translate into actions. First, she stopped doing the household chores. Not from one day to the next, but progressively. One day the kitchen was dirty and she didn't clean it. I thought she had a bad shift. Another day, the laundry wasn't done. I didn't say anything either, but then it started to become constant. When I asked her, her answer was simple. "I've been working all day. I'm tired." I understood, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that this logic only applied to her. I also worked all day, and yet when I saw something wasn't done, I did it. Little by little, the tasks we previously shared or that she assumed ended up falling almost entirely on me. And the most uncomfortable part wasn't that. It was that she stopped acknowledging it. Before, at least, there was an intention of balance. Now she acted as if it were normal, as if I should do it. The next change was with the cards. At first, as I said, she was responsible, but over time the expenses started to rise, not exaggeratedly at first, but enough to notice. More frequent purchases, less necessary things, more constant outings. When I reviewed the statements, I saw charges we hadn't discussed. When I mentioned it to her, her response was defensive. I'm working. I also have the right to spend on myself. I didn't say no, but I did remind her that the cards were in my name, that we needed to maintain some control. She didn't like that. Again, that expression, that mix of annoyance and disdain, as if I were being unfair. The arguments started to appear. They weren't explosive, but they were constant. Small frictions that accumulated. Uncomfortable comments, long silences, and an increasingly clear feeling that something was changing in how she saw me. The point where everything became obvious was one weekend. Valentina told me she was going to invite her friends over to the house. She didn't ask, she just informed me. I didn't object. It was her space too, at least in theory. That Saturday, they arrived in the afternoon. From the beginning, I noticed something different about her. Her attitude was more confident, but in a way that wasn't natural, more aggressive somehow. I tried to be cordial. I greeted them, offered drinks, tried to integrate, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't the type of interaction they were looking for. There was a dynamic among them that I didn't fit into. Comments, laughs, looks. It wasn't direct hostility, but it was a kind of implicit contempt. At one point, Valentina decided to introduce me. She stood up, raised her glass, and said with a smile, "I introduce you to Nico, the useless guy I have to take care of, but I love him." All three of them laughed. It wasn't an uncomfortable laugh. It was natural, as if it were a valid joke. I didn't react immediately. I looked at her expecting her to correct herself, to say it was a joke. She didn't. She just continued as if nothing happened. In that instant, I understood something I had probably been ignoring for a while. She no longer saw me as her partner. And the worst part wasn't that she thought it. It was that she felt comfortable saying it out loud in front of other people with no intention of correcting herself. I didn't say anything at that moment. After the comment in front of her friends, I just got up and walked towards the bedroom. I didn't want to react in the heat of the moment, not in front of them. Not because I cared what they thought, but because I sensed Valentina was looking for exactly that, a reaction. I closed the door quietly and stood in silence for a few seconds. I could hear their voices from the living room, laughter, glasses, a relaxed conversation, as if nothing had happened. That was what made me the most uncomfortable. For them it had been a joke. For me it wasn't. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to sort out what I felt. It wasn't just anger, it was a mix of disappointment and something deeper, a feeling of having been reduced to something I wasn't. The laughter continued. After a few minutes I got up. I don't know exactly why I did it. Maybe because I needed to confirm something. Maybe because I already sensed that what I had heard before wasn't the worst. I opened the door carefully and walked slowly down the hallway. I didn't go directly into the living room. I stopped before, just enough to listen without being seen. "Hey," one of the friends said, "don't you think he'll get mad about what you said earlier?" There was a short pause. Valentina's voice replied calmly, almost unconcerned. "I don't care if he says anything to me. I just cross my legs when we're in bed, and you'll see how he starts begging and asking for forgiveness." The others laughed. I felt something tense inside me. Another of them chimed in. "Why are men so basic? With that you practically control them." "Exactly," Valentina replied. "I'm already making him clean. He has to pay me with something, right? I pay like 80% of this house." That sentence made me frown. "Seriously," another said, "then he really is useless. How embarrassing to be with a man like that." Valentina didn't hesitate. "I still basically keep him because he does the household chores." "So he's your servant," another added. All three laughed. It wasn't a light laugh. It was a comfortable, confident laugh, as if they were completely convinced of what they were saying. At that moment, I stopped feeling anger. It was something colder, clearer, as if all the pieces finally fit together. Then Valentina spoke again. "Do you want to see a demonstration of how trained I have him?" "Yes," they answered almost at the same time. I stayed still. I knew what was coming. A second later, I heard her raise her voice. "Nico, love, can you come?" I took a deep breath. I took a few steps back and then walked towards the living room, making enough noise so it seemed natural. When I entered, she was already looking at me. "Tell me, Valentina, what's up?" She was smiling, but it wasn't a genuine smile. "Love, my friend is feeling a little sick. She has her period. Can you go buy some pads, but walk because I might use the car right now to go buy some drinks." I looked at her for a few seconds. Then I replied calmly, "Then, Use the car to buy your friend's pads, too. I'm busy with a client. I turned around. I gave no further explanations, but I didn't even take 3 steps when her voice sounded again. This time different. It's not a request, love, it's an order. So go out now and get those pads. I stopped. I turned around slowly. Didn't you hear that I'm busy? Her expression barely changed, just enough to notice that she wasn't used to being told no. If you don't do it, she said, no sex for the rest of the month. There was silence. Then I laughed. It wasn't an exaggerated laugh. It was short, almost automatic. And without saying anything else, I turned around again and walked towards the bedroom. I didn't get to go in. Before closing the door, I heard her voice again, this time louder. Of course, you're not worried about your problems lately, are you? You should eat better so you don't have those difficulties. The laughter didn't take long to appear. It was at that moment I decided enough was enough. I went back. I didn't run. I didn't make unnecessary noise. I simply returned to the living room. All 4 looked at me. What are you trying to do with all this, Valentina? I asked. There was no more calm in my voice. There was no yelling either. It was something more direct. She tensed slightly. What are you talking about? Humiliating me. I continued. You tell them you pay 80% of this house when you've never put a single peso here. Her expression changed completely. For the first time all night, she looked uncomfortable. Shut up, she said in a low voice. I shook my head. No, the one who's going to shut up here is you. I'm sick of this. The atmosphere became heavy. Her friends were no longer smiling the same way. You know something? I added. We're done. The sentence hung in the air. Valentina blinked as if she hadn't understood. You can't break up with me, she replied almost immediately. You need me more than I need you. That sentence, that was the one that finished closing everything. I stared at her. What do I need you for? She didn't answer. If the only thing you've been lately is a parasite in my life, I continued. Get out. You and your friends. One of them chimed in immediately. What a weak man you are. Another shook her head. Now we understand everything. I didn't answer. I had nothing to prove to them. Valentina held my gaze for a few more seconds. There was anger, but also something else, uncertainty, as if she didn't expect things to go this far. Finally, she grabbed her bag. Let's go, she told her friends. None of them argued. They got up, grabbed their things, and walked towards the door. Before leaving, one of them gave me one last look of contempt. The door closed, and silence returned. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. I walked to the bedroom, picked up the phone, and called the bank. There was no drama, just clear steps. Identity verification, confirmation of the additional cards, and a direct request. I want to cancel both additional cards immediately. The operator asked a couple of routine questions. He offered to block them temporarily, but I declined the option. Permanent cancellation. In less than 10 minutes, the matter was resolved. I hung up, and with that I closed one of the last things that linked us. The next day, I changed the main lock. It wasn't impulsive. It was a practical decision. I didn't want surprises. I didn't want unnecessary arguments inside the house either. While the locksmith worked, I gathered all of Valentina's things, clothes, some personal objects, things she had left in the bathroom and in the bedroom. I didn't check too much, just the necessary. I put them in a large black trash bag and left it by the door. I didn't feel bad about doing it. I felt orderly. That same afternoon, around 6, there was a knock at the door. I didn't open it immediately. I looked through the peephole. It was her. I took a deep breath and opened it, but I didn't move from the frame. I didn't let her in. What are you doing? She said, trying to enter. I extended my arm, blocking the way. You're not coming in. She frowned in confusion. What are you talking about? I live here. I shook my head. You used to live here. Her expression changed immediately. Now you're going to come at me with that again. I didn't answer. She noticed the black bag to the side. What is that? Your things, I said. She looked at it, then looked at me. Are you serious? Yes. Her tone rose. You also changed the lock? Yes. There was a brief, charged silence. Then she exploded. And the cards, she said. You also think you can just take them away from me like that? You have nothing to do with them anymore, I replied. Excuse me, she retorted. I used them. Exactly, I said. You used them. I was just buying normal things, she insisted. You're overreacting. I shook my head. Stop throwing tantrums, Valentina. That sentence stopped her for a second. She wasn't used to that tone. Tantrums, she repeated. Seriously, are you saying that to me? Yes, I replied. This is over. Take your things and go. Her eyes filled with anger. You can't do this to me. I already did. I looked at her directly, and I'm not going to repeat it. She stood there motionless, as if expecting me to give in. I didn't. After a few seconds, she reluctantly picked up the bag. This isn't over, she said. I didn't answer. She turned around and walked away, this time without looking back. I closed the door, and for the second time in a few days, I felt something settling. I thought that would be it. I was wrong. 2 nights later, at approximately 3 in the morning, a noise woke me up. At first I thought I had imagined it, but it came back, a soft knock like something brushing against the glass. I got up slowly without making noise. The house was dark. The sound came from the living room. I walked carefully to the hallway and peeked out, and I saw her. Valentina, coming through the window. She had opened it from the outside. She was climbing in with difficulty, trying not to make too much noise. For a second, I stood in silence, processing the scene. Then I spoke. Are you crazy? She startled. She turned her head towards me. Nico, what are you doing here? I said, taking a step forward. Do you realize what you're doing? She stood up completely inside the house. I just came to talk, she said, to fix things. I shook my head. This isn't talking, this is breaking in. I'm not breaking in, she insisted. I just needed to see you. I took out my phone. I'm going to call the police. Her expression changed immediately. Don't do that. I'm already doing it. I just came out of love, she said quickly. You don't have to overreact. I didn't answer. I dialed. It was at that moment that she moved towards me. She didn't seem aggressive at first, but from 1 second to the next, she took something out of her bag. I didn't identify it immediately until I felt it. An electric shock went through my body. It was instantaneous, intense. My muscles tensed uncontrollably. I fell backwards, losing my balance. I couldn't move well. I couldn't react. What are you doing? I tried to say, but my voice came out weak. She didn't answer. She did it again. Another shock and another. I felt my body stop responding as if it didn't belong to me. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't coordinate. The pain wasn't the only thing. It was the feeling of total loss of control. I heard my own breathing, fast, irregular. She was on top of me, agitated. Why are you doing this? She said. I just want you to listen to me. I couldn't answer. Not clearly. Then, in the distance, sirens were heard. She stopped, looked towards the door. Did you call? She said angrily. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The following seconds were confusing, but the sirens were approaching fast, very fast. Someone knocked on the door. Then again, louder. Police. Valentina stepped back. She tried to compose herself, but it was too late. They forced their way in. 2 officers entered and assessed the situation in seconds. Me on the floor, her standing, the device still in her hand. Drop that, they ordered. She didn't resist. They arrested her right there. What followed was a long process, longer than I expected. At first, it seemed like it would end in a minor offense, a warning, a restraining order, and nothing more. But I didn't leave it at that, not because I wanted revenge, but because what she did wasn't minor. She entered without permission, assaulted me, and it could have been worse. I gathered evidence, medical reports, the call log, the officer's testimony, and I insisted until the case moved forward. Finally, it was classified as a more serious assault. The result was clear. 2 years in prison. It wasn't immediate, but arrived. The last time I saw her was during the trial. She looked at me with hatred. I'll make you pay when I get out, she said. I didn't answer. I had nothing to say to her. This happened 3 years ago. Since then, I haven't heard from her. No messages, no calls, nothing. And honestly, that's fine, because there are things that can't be fixed, can't be negotiated, and can't be repeated. They end.